"So this is what's between legs of human males?" The exclamation echoed through the sterile examination room, sending a chill down Randy Boyd's spine. He stood exposed and vulnerable as a group of wide-eyed Malone scientists crowded around him, their curiosity palpable. Randy, a seasoned astronaut chosen for this critical diplomatic mission to Malona, had expected challenges. He'd prepared for alien customs, unfamiliar technologies, even potential hostility, but nothing had readied him for becoming an impromptu biology exhibit. The Malone, an advanced species that reproduced asexually, had never encountered a race with external genitalia. To them, Randy's anatomy was as alien as their bioluminescent skin was to him. Kairos, a young Malone scientist assigned to study human physiology, leaned in closer, fascination evident in their large, multifaceted eyes. "Fascinating. The human male possesses external reproductive organs. This is unprecedented in our studies of galactic life forms," Kairos announced, voice tinged with excitement. Randy shifted uncomfortably, acutely aware of the cultural chasm between them. What was a routine medical examination to the Malone felt like a profound violation to him. The human diplomatic team, observing from behind a transparent barrier, exchanged worried glances. Ambassador Chen stepped forward, her voice tight with controlled anger. "This examination is over. You will allow Mr. Boyd to dress immediately, or we'll be forced to reconsider our presence on Malona." The Malone scientists recoiled, surprised by the vehemence of the human response. They had viewed Randy as a scientific curiosity, not considering the emotional impact of their actions on a sentient being. As Randy hurriedly donned his uniform, tension filled the room. The future of human-Malon relations, once bright with promise, now teetered on a knife's edge. The incident had exposed not just Randy's anatomy, but the vast gulf of understanding between their species. Outside the examination room, news of the human's unique physiology spread rapidly through Malone society. Some reacted with fascination, others with fear. Debates erupted in the Malone government chambers, with one faction arguing for the immediate expulsion of the human delegation. "They are too alien, too unpredictable," a senior Malone official declared. "Their presence threatens the very fabric of our society." As the diplomatic crisis unfolded, Randy found himself at the center of a potential interspecies conflict. The embarrassment of the examination paled in comparison to the weight now resting on his shoulders. He knew that his every action, every word, could tip the scales between a new era of cooperation or a future of isolation and potential hostility. Kairos, despite warnings from superiors about becoming too personally involved, approached Randy. "I apologize for any distress we may have caused. Our intention was purely scientific, but I see now that we failed to consider your feelings." Randy nodded, appreciating the gesture but still wary. He recognized in Kairos a genuine desire to bridge the gap between their species, but the road ahead would be challenging. As the human diplomatic team worked tirelessly to salvage the mission, the stakes became increasingly clear. Failure here could cost humanity access to the Milan's advanced technology and potentially create a new threat in the galaxy. The incident in the examination room had inadvertently exposed the fragility of interspecies relations and the enormous challenges of overcoming biological and cultural differences. Randy took a deep breath, steeling himself for the difficult days ahead. He had come to Malona as an astronaut and a diplomat. Now he found himself an unwitting ambassador for human biology, tasked with navigating a complex maze of alien politics and cultural misunderstandings. The future of human-Malon relations hung in the balance, all because of what lay between his legs. Randy Boyd stared out the window of his quarters, the alien cityscape of Malona stretching before him. The events of the past few days greatly troubled on his mind, his body still tense from the unexpected scrutiny he'd endured. He felt adrift, caught between two worlds, neither of which seemed to fully understand him. A soft chime at his door broke through his brooding. Randy hesitated, then called out, "Enter." The door slid open, revealing Kairos. The young Malon scientist stood in the doorway, holding a tray of colorful, unfamiliar objects. Their multifaceted eyes shimmered with what Randy now recognized as nervousness. "Greetings, Randy Boyd," Kairos said, voice modulated to a gentle tone. "I bring sustenance and an apology. Randy's eyebrows raised. He hadn't expected this. "Come in," he said, gesturing to a nearby table. Karos entered, placing the tray on the table. "These are delicacies from various regions of Malona. I hoped they might appeal to your human palate." Randy approached cautiously, examining the array of foods. Some pulsed with bioluminescence, while others remained still, their textures ranging from gelatinous to crystalline. "Thank you," Randy said, picking up a small glowing cube. He popped it into his mouth, surprised by the burst of sweet, tangy flavor. "It's interesting." Karos's skin flickered with relief. "I'm pleased you find it palatable. Randy, I must express my deepest regrets for the distress we caused during the examination. Our enthusiasm for scientific discovery blinded us to your discomfort." Randy swallowed, both the food and his lingering resentment. "I appreciate that, Karos. It's just, there's so much we don't understand about each other." They talked for hours, Randy explaining human concepts of privacy and personal space, while Karos detailed the intricacies of Malon asexual reproduction. As the conversation flowed, the tension between them eased, replaced by a growing sense of camaraderie. Days passed, and Randy found himself looking forward to Karos's visits. They decided to venture beyond the confines of the research facility, exploring the vibrant Malon capital city. As they walked through a bustling market square, Randy marveled at the alien architecture and technology surrounding them. Karos explained the function of various gadgets and structures, their excitement palpable. Suddenly, a commotion erupted nearby. A group of Malons had gathered, their skin pulsing with angry red hues. At their center stood a tall, imposing figure, his voice booming across the square. "Behold," the figure shouted, pointing at Randy, "the alien that threatens our very way of life." Randy froze, recognizing the speaker as Zax, a prominent anti-human politician he'd seen in briefings. Zax continued, his words inciting the crowd. "These humans, with their bizarre biology and unpredictable nature, have no place on Malona. We demand their immediate expulsion." The crowd's agitation grew, their collective bioluminescence creating a disorienting light show. Randy felt exposed, acutely aware of his alienness among the Malons. To his surprise, Karos stepped forward, placing themselves between Randy and the hostile crowd. "You speak from ignorance, Zax," Karos declared, their voice carrying across the square. "I have spent time with Randy Boyd. The humans are not a threat, but an opportunity for growth and understanding." Karos's impassioned defense caught the attention of nearby Malons with recording devices. Within moments, the confrontation was being broadcast across Malon information networks. "Consider the advancements we could achieve through cooperation," Karos continued. "Our differences are not a weakness, but a strength. Together, we could unlock secrets of the universe neither species could discover alone." The crowd's mood shifted, murmurs of agreement mixing with the earlier hostility. Zax, realizing he was losing ground, retreated with a final glare at Randy. As they made their way back to the research facility, Randy's communicator buzzed. It was Ambassador Chen, her voice tight with awe-inspiring anger. "Boyd, report to the diplomatic quarters immediately." The reprimand was swift and severe. "You've put the entire mission at risk," Chen said, pacing the room. "Your unauthorized excursion into the city has caused a political firestorm. From now on, you are to limit all interactions with the Malons, especially Karos." Randy wanted to argue, to explain the progress he'd made with Karos, but the stern look in Chen's eyes silenced him. Later, as Randy sat alone in his quarters, he received a message from Karos. The young scientist had been reassigned to a different department, effectively separating them. Randy's heart sank, the weight of his duty to the mission clashing with his growing feelings for Karos. As he pondered his next move, Randy's communicator chimed again. This time, it was a priority message from Earth. His stomach dropped as he read the contents. Due to the deteriorating situation on Malona, the entire human diplomatic mission was being recalled. Randy stared at the message, his mind racing. Leave Malona? Leave Karos? The thought filled him with a sense of loss he hadn't expected. But disobeying a direct order could end his career, possibly even lead to charges of insubordination. Outside his window, the alien sun of Malona was setting, casting long shadows across the city. In the distance, he could see crowds gathering, no doubt debating the future of human-Malon relations. Somewhere out there, Karos was likely facing their own dilemma, caught between duty and the connection they'd formed. Randy's hand hovered over his communicator. He could acknowledge the order, pack his bags, and be on the next ship back to Earth. It was the safe choice, the expected choice. But as he looked out at the Malon city, thinking of Karos and the potential for understanding they'd begun to build, he hesitated. The fate of two species hung in the balance, and Randy Boyd found himself at the center of it all. Whatever he decided next would shape not only his future, but potentially the future of human-Malon relations for generations to come. Randy's hand hovered over his communicator, torn between duty and the unexpected connection he'd forged on this alien world. As he stared at the recall order, a realization struck him. He couldn't leave, not like this. There had to be another way. With a deep breath, he made his decision. Instead of acknowledging the order, Randy composed a message to Counselor Nira, a prominent figure in the Malon government's progressive faction. He requested an urgent meeting, his mind racing with the beginnings of a plan. Hours later, Randy found himself in Nira's private chambers, the bioluminescent walls pulsing with a calming blue hue. The counselor's multifaceted eyes studied him intently as he laid out his proposal. A joint expedition to the polar region? Nira's skin rippled with interest. It's certainly bold, but the political risks are significant. Randy leaned forward, his voice earnest. That's precisely why it could work. We need a grand gesture, something to show the potential of human-Malon cooperation. Nira's appendages tapped rhythmically on her desk as she considered his words. You realize, of course, that Zax and his faction will fight this with everything they have. I'm counting on it, Randy replied, a glimmer of commitment in his eyes. Their opposition will only draw more attention to our cause. After a moment of contemplation, Nira nodded. Very well, human Randy Boyd. I will support your proposal. But we'll need more than just political backing. We need scientific credibility. She activated a holographic display, revealing the image of a stern-looking Malon with intricate patterns etched into their exoskeleton. This is Professor Liren, our foremost expert on ancient Malon artifacts. She's been petitioning for years to explore the polar region. If anyone can lend legitimacy to this expedition, it's her. A quick communication later, and Professor Liren materialized in the room via hologram. Her initial skepticism was palpable, her bioluminescence flickering with distrust as she regarded Randy. Work with a human? Preposterous, Liren scoffed. Our methods are far too advanced for their primitive understanding. Randy bit back a retort, reminding himself of the delicate nature of their situation. Instead, he appealed to her scientific curiosity. Professor, imagine the insights we could gain by combining our perspectives. The polar region has been off-limits for so long, this may be your only chance to uncover its secrets. Liren's luminescence shifted, a grudging interest replacing her earlier disdain. I suppose there might be some value in observing human research techniques, for comparative purposes, of course. As they began to hash out the details of the expedition, Randy's communicator chimed. His heart leapt when he saw the sender. Karos! Randy, Karos's voice crackled through the device. I've heard rumors of your plan. I want in. My superiors have agreed to assign me as the expedition's biologist. They're particularly interested in studying human physiology under extreme conditions. A wave of relief washed over Randy. With Karos on board, the team was starting to take shape, but their elation was short-lived. Nira's communication device flashed urgently. Her expression darkened as she read the incoming message. Zax has caught wind of our plans. He's launching a media blitz, painting this expedition as a human ploy to steal Malon cultural artifacts. Randy's mind raced. They needed to counter Zax's narrative, and fast. An idea formed, bold and potentially disastrous, but it might be their only chance. Counselor, he said, his voice steady despite his pounding heart, I want to challenge Zax to a public debate. Live, planet-wide broadcast. The room fell silent. Even Liren's hologram seemed to hold its breath. Nira's eyes widened. You understand what you're proposing? Zax is a master orator, well-versed in Malin politics and culture. This could backfire spectacularly. It's a risk we have to take, Randy insisted. We need to show the Milan people that we're not here to conquer or exploit. We're here to learn, to grow together. Over the next few days, Randy underwent intensive training with Nira and her team. He immersed himself in Malin history, culture, and political intricacies. Karos proved invaluable, providing insights into Malin perspectives that no briefing could capture. As they worked together, Randy found himself drawn even closer to Karos. Their discussions often stretched late into the night, moving beyond expedition planning to personal hopes and fears. Yet both were acutely aware of the challenges their growing feelings presented. The day of the debate arrived all too soon. Randy stood backstage in the Milan capital's Grand Assembly Hall, his heart thundering in his chest. Through a view screen, he could see Zax already on stage, his bioluminescence pulsing with confidence. Karos appeared at his side, their skin shimmering with supportive hues. Remember, Randy, you're not just speaking for yourself or even for Earth. You're speaking for the possibility of a future where our species stand together. Randy nodded, taking a deep breath. As he stepped onto the stage, the lights of 1,000 recording devices bathed him in their glow. Billions of Malone eyes watched, waiting to judge whether this alien creature could be trusted. Zax's opening statement was a masterpiece of fear-mongering. He painted vivid pictures of human barbarity, of Earth's troubled history, of the threat this invasive species posed to Malone way of life. When it was Randy's turn to speak, he felt the weight of two worlds on his shoulders. He began not with grand rhetoric, but with humility. People of Malona, he said, his voice clear and steady, I stand before you not as a conqueror or a thief, but as a student. Our journey here has been one of discovery, and yes, of mistakes. He addressed the medical examination incident head-on, explaining human concepts of privacy and consent. We have much to learn from each other, he continued, and much to gain through cooperation. As the debate progressed, Randy countered Zax's emotional appeals with reasoned arguments and genuine passion for the possibilities of human-Malin alliance. He spoke of the proposed polar expedition not as a human endeavor, but as a joint quest for knowledge that could benefit both species. Zax, his confidence visibly shaken, resorted to increasingly desperate attacks. In a flash of inspiration, Randy saw his opening. If you truly believe humans have nefarious intentions, Randy challenged, looking Zax directly in his multifaceted eyes, then join our expedition, witness our actions firsthand, help safeguard your people's heritage. The assembly hall erupted in a cacophony of bioluminescent flashes and excited chatter. Zax, caught off guard, struggled to form a coherent response. As the debate concluded, early polls showed a significant shift in public opinion. Support for the expedition and for continued human presence on Malona was growing, but the final decision lay with the Malone High Council. Randy, Karos, and their allies gathered in a private chamber, anxiously awaiting news of the council's emergency session. The debate played on view screens around them, analysts dissecting every word and gesture. Hours stretched by, the tension in the room palpable. As the Malone capital's artificial night cycle began, casting the city in a soft, bioluminescent glow, Randy's communicator chimed. The message was brief. High Council chambers, immediately. Randy exchanged a look with Karos, hope and fear mingling in their eyes. Whatever the council had decided, it would shape the future of human-Malon relations and their own intertwined destinies for years to come. With a deep breath, Randy stood. The long walk to the council chambers loomed before him, each step carrying the weight of two worlds' hopes and fears. As Randy entered the High Council chambers, the bioluminescent patterns on the walls pulsed with an intensity that matched his racing heart. The council members, their exoskeletons adorned with intricate markings denoting their elevated status, sat in a semicircle before him. Their multifaceted eyes focused on Randy as he took his place in the center of the room. The head counselor, a Milan with deep blue markings, spoke first. Human Randy Boyd, we have reached a decision regarding your proposed joint expedition to the polar region. Randy held his breath, acutely aware of the weight of this moment. The council approves the expedition, the head counselor continued, but with strict conditions. Relief washed over Randy, quickly followed by apprehension as he waited to hear the stipulations. First, the expedition team will consist of you, Kairos, Professor Liren, and... The counselor paused, his bioluminescence flickering slightly. Zax. Randy's eyes widened. Zax? The very Milan who had vehemently opposed their presence on Malona? This would complicate matters significantly. Second, the counselor continued, the expedition will depart immediately. We cannot afford delays that might allow opposition to mount. Randy nodded, his mind already racing with the logistical challenges this would present. Finally, all discoveries made during this expedition will be jointly owned and studied by both our species. Any attempt to conceal or monopolize findings will result in severe consequences. I understand and accept these conditions, Randy replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil of emotions within him. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparations. Randy barely had time to inform his superiors of the council's decision before he found himself boarding a Malin transport vehicle specially designed for polar conditions. As they set out across Malona's frozen landscape, Randy couldn't help but marvel at the alien beauty around him. Massive ice formations jutted from the ground like crystalline skyscrapers, their surfaces refracting the light of Malona's distant sun into a dazzling array of colors. Inside the vehicle, the atmosphere was tense. Zax sat rigidly in his seat, his bioluminescence pulsing with scarcely controlled hostility. Professor Liren busied herself with her scientific equipment, her excitement for the expedition evident despite her initial skepticism about working with humans. Kairos moved to sit beside Randy, their exoskeleton brushing against his arm. "How are you holding up?" they asked quietly. "I'm fine," Randy replied, though he couldn't suppress a shiver. The vehicle's environmental controls were calibrated for Malin physiology, leaving him feeling chilled. Kairos noticed his discomfort. "Your protective gear isn't sufficient," they observed. Without hesitation, they began adjusting Randy's suit, their dexterous appendages manipulating the unfamiliar human technology with surprising skill. As Kairos worked, their bioluminescence pulsed with a warm, comforting glow. Randy felt a surge of gratitude for their presence, a feeling that went beyond mere appreciation for their assistance. Their moment of connection was interrupted by a violent lurch of the vehicle. Outside, a fierce snowstorm had descended upon them, battering their transport with gale-force winds and pellets of ice. "Impossible," Zax muttered, his multifaceted eyes fixed on the navigational display. "These weather patterns weren't predicted by any of our models." Professor Liren joined him at the console, her scientific curiosity overriding her earlier aloofness. "Fascinating," she said, her appendages flying over the controls. "The polar region's climate appears to be far more volatile than our previous data suggested." As the team worked to navigate through the storm, Randy found himself relying heavily on Kairos. The Malin's familiarity with the equipment and their planet's unique environmental challenges proved invaluable. For 3 days they pressed on through the unforgiving terrain. The constant battle against the elements began to wear on them all. Even Zax's hostility seemed to dim in the face of their shared struggle for survival. On the 3rd day, as they crested a particularly treacherous ice formation, Professor Liren's instruments began to emit a series of rapid beeps. "Incredible," she breathed, her bioluminescence flashing with excitement. "I'm detecting complex structural patterns beneath the ice. It appears to be artificial." The team gathered around her display, all previous tensions momentarily forgotten in the face of this discovery. "An ancient Malon structure," Zax said, his voice a mix of awe and suspicion. "But what is it doing out here in the middle of nowhere?" As they began to excavate the site, the true scale of their discovery became apparent. The entrance they uncovered led to a vast complex buried deep within the ice. Randy's communicator crackled to life, the signal weak but audible. "Base camp, this is Expedition Team Alpha. We've discovered an ancient structure of unknown origin, requesting permission to explore further." As he waited for a response, Randy didn't notice Zax moving towards the communication equipment. In a swift motion, the Malon's appendage struck out, ostensibly reaching for a tool, but instead knocking the delicate machinery to the ground. The communicator sparked and went dead, its casing cracked from the impact. An unfortunate accident, Zax said, his bioluminescence pulsing in a pattern Randy couldn't quite interpret. It seems we're on our own now. As the team exchanged uneasy glances, the wind howled outside, driving snow and ice against the ancient structure. Their expedition had taken an unexpected turn, and the true challenges were only beginning to reveal themselves. As dawn broke over the polar region of Malona, the expedition team emerged from the ancient structure, blinking against the harsh light reflecting off the endless expanse of snow and ice. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape transformed by drifts and newly formed ice formations. Randy surveyed their surroundings, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. "Our vehicles are buried," he said, pointing to the barely visible outlines of their transports beneath mounds of snow. "And without proper communication equipment, we're cut off from base camp." Zax's bioluminescence flickered with a pattern that could almost be interpreted as concern. "The High Council will be expecting updates. Our absence will not go unnoticed." "Then we need to move," Caro said, their exoskeletons shifting to better insulate against the cold. "We can't stay here and wait for rescue." Randy nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. "We'll have to trek back to base camp on foot. It's our best chance of survival and getting our discoveries to the Council." Using his astronaut training, Randy quickly organized the team. He salvaged parts from their damaged vehicles, fashioning crude but effective snowshoes to help them navigate the deep snow. As he worked, Karos assisted, their appendages moving with surprising dexterity as they adapted the designs for Malon physiology. "These should help distribute our weight more evenly," Randy explained, demonstrating how to secure the snowshoes. "It'll make the journey easier, though it'll still be tough going." As they prepared for departure, Professor Liren hunched over a datapad, her bioluminescence pulsing with excitement. "Fascinating," she murmured. "These records we salvaged. They mention a long-lost Malon outpost, somewhere in this region." Zax moved closer, his interest piqued. "An outpost? Out here in the polar wasteland?" Liren nodded, her appendages moving rapidly over the screen. "According to this, it houses advanced technology that could revolutionize both our societies. If we could find it..." Randy and Karos exchanged glances. "It could be our best chance of contacting base camp," Karos said. "And potentially change everything," Randy added. "All right, new plan. We search for this outpost while making our way back to base. Professor, can you use those records to guide us?" Liren's bioluminescence flashed in affirmation. "I believe so. The data is fragmented, but I can piece together a general direction." With their new objective set, the team began their arduous journey across the frozen landscape. The going was slow, each step a battle against the deep snow and treacherous ice. Randy took point, his human physiology better adapted to the cold than his Malon companions. As they crested a rise on the third day of their trek, a sound like distant thunder reached them. The ground beneath their feet trembled slightly. "What is that?" Zax asked, his multifaceted eyes scanning the horizon. The answer came into view as they reached the top of the hill. A vast herd of enormous woolly creatures filled the valley below, their massive forms moving with surprising grace across the snowy terrain. "Incredible," Professor Liren breathed, her scientific curiosity overriding her exhaustion. "These creatures have never been documented before. Their adaptation to this environment is remarkable." Randy was about to suggest they observe from a safe distance when a shift in the wind carried their scent towards the herd. The nearest beasts raised their heads, trunks swaying as they caught the unfamiliar smell. "We need to move," Karos said urgently. "They're becoming agitated." The team retreated, but it was too late. The herd, startled by their presence, began to move en masse, their thunderous steps shaking the ground. Panic set in as the expedition members realized they were in the path of a potential stampede. "This way!" Randy shouted, spotting a narrow ice ravine to their left. "We can take shelter in there!" They rushed towards the ravine, the sound of the approaching herd growing louder with each passing second. As they entered the narrow passage, chunks of ice rained down from above, dislodged by the vibrations of the stampede. Zax, bringing up the rear, lost his footing on a patch of slick ice. He slid towards the edge of a deep crevasse, his appendages scrabbling for purchase on the smooth surface. Without hesitation, Randy turned back, throwing himself onto the ice and reaching for Zax. "Grab my hand," Randy yelled, stretching as far as he could without falling into the crevasse himself. For a moment, Zax hesitated, his deeply ingrained mistrust of humans warring with his survival instinct. Then, as another tremor shook the ravine, he reached out, clasping Randy's hand with his appendage. With a monumental effort, Randy pulled Zax to safety, both of them collapsing on the ice as the last of the herd thundered past above them. As the dust settled and the team caught their breath, Zax turned to Randy, his bioluminescence pulsing in a pattern Randy had never seen before. You saved my life," Zax said, his voice carrying a note of grudging respect. Randy nodded, still panting from the exertion. "We're in this together, all of us." The incident marked a turning point in the expedition. As they continued their search for the hidden outpost, the barriers between human and Malon began to crumble. They worked together to overcome the challenges of the harsh environment, their unique strengths complementing each other in ways none had anticipated. Days passed and their food supplies dwindled dangerously low. The team was forced to hunt the local wildlife, combining Randy's instinctual human hunting techniques with the Malon's technological approach. Their success in procuring food ensured their survival, but it also sparked intense discussions about the ethics of their actions in this pristine ecosystem. "We're altering a balance that's existed for millennia," Professor Leron argued as they huddled around a heat source, consuming their hard-won meal. "Our own survival has to take precedence," Zax countered, though his tone lacked its usual conviction. Randy listened to the debate, acutely aware of the weight of their choices. As he caught Karos's eye across the makeshift camp, he realized that every decision they made here could have far-reaching consequences for both their species. Little did they know, the greatest test of their newfound unity and the key to unlocking the mysteries of their shared past lay just ahead, buried beneath the unforgiving ice of Malona's polar region. As the team huddled in the shadow of an ice formation, discussing their next move, a distant rumble caught their attention. At first, Randy thought it might be another herd of the woolly creatures they had encountered earlier. But as the sound grew louder, a familiar shape appeared on the horizon. "It's a rescue ship," Randy exclaimed, his voice hoarse from days of exposure to the frigid air. The sleek vessel descended gracefully, kicking up swirls of snow as it landed nearby. The team scrambled to gather their equipment and the precious artifacts they had discovered. As the ship's hatch opened, Randy felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Their ordeal in the polar wasteland was over, but he knew the real challenges lay ahead. Once aboard, Randy and Karos immediately set to work organizing their findings. They hunched over a makeshift workstation in the ship's cargo hold, carefully cataloging each artifact and data crystal. "This is extraordinary," Karos said, their bioluminescence pulsing with excitement as they examined a particularly intricate piece of ancient Malon technology. "These artifacts could revolutionize our understanding of Malon history." Randy nodded, his fingers flying over a data pad as he input their observations. "And not just Malon history," he added. "Look at this." He pulled up an image of a carving they had found deep within the buried structure. It depicted what appeared to be early Malons interacting with bipedal creatures that bore a striking resemblance to humans. As the ship approached the Malon capital, tension filled the air. The team was immediately whisked away to an emergency session of the High Council. Randy's stomach churned as they entered the grand chamber, acutely aware of the hostile glares directed his way. Counselor Nira, her bioluminescence pulsing with a mix of anticipation and concern, called the session to order. "Expedition Team Alpha, present your findings," she commanded. Randy stepped forward, his heart pounding. He took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice steady despite his nerves. "Honored council members, what we discovered in the polar region will change everything we thought we knew about our species' histories." As Randy and Karos presented their evidence, gasps and murmurs rippled through the chamber. The artifacts and data crystals painted a picture of a shared past between humans and Malons, one that had been lost to time. "And there's more," Karos added, their voice filled with excitement. They projected an image of the preserved ancient Malon specimens they had uncovered. These specimens show clear evidence of sexual dimorphism in early Malons, a trait that has since been lost in our modern physiology. The room erupted into chaos as council members argued amongst themselves. Amidst the commotion, Zack stepped forward, his multifaceted eyes gleaming with tenacity. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, his voice cutting through the noise, "I was once among those who distrusted humans, who saw them as a threat to our way of life. But after witnessing Randy's bravery and resourcefulness during our expedition, I have come to see the value in cooperation between our species." Zack's words seemed to have a calming effect on the council, but outside the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Through the chamber's windows, they could see crowds gathering in the streets, their bioluminescence flashing in angry patterns. Councillor Nira's appendages moved rapidly as she considered their options. "We need to address the public directly," she said finally. "Randy, would you be willing to undergo a public medical examination? It could help demystify human physiology and address the controversy surrounding your presence here." Randy hesitated, glancing at Karos. Their bioluminescence pulsed in a pattern he had come to recognize as encouragement. He nodded slowly. "If it will help, I'll do it." The examination took place in a specially prepared facility, with cameras broadcasting every moment to the entire planet. Randy lay on an examination table, feeling exposed and vulnerable as Malon medical staff prodded and scanned him. Karos stood nearby, translating and explaining the procedures to both Randy and the watching public. As the examination progressed, Randy could see the fascination growing in the eyes of the Milan staff. They marveled at his internal organs, so different from their own, and were particularly intrigued by his skeletal structure. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Security forces rushed past the examination room, their bioluminescence flashing urgently. "What's happening?" Randy asked, sitting up on the table. Before Karos could answer, an explosion rocked the building. Smoke filled the corridors, and they could hear shouts and the sound of fighting drawing nearer. "Anti-human extremists," Karos explained quickly. "They're trying to sabotage the broadcast." Randy's training kicked in. He grabbed a nearby piece of medical equipment, using it to barricade the door. "We need to find a way out of here," he said, scanning the room for possible escape routes. The attackers pounded on the door, the metal groaning under the assault. Randy positioned himself between the door and Karos, ready to defend against the intruders. Just as the door began to give way, a second explosion shook the building. This time, it was followed by the sounds of Malon's security forces engaging the attackers. In the chaos, a section of the ceiling collapsed, sending debris raining down on them. Without hesitation, Randy threw himself over Karos, shielding them from the falling chunks of metal and concrete. A sharp pain lanced through his side as a piece of rebar struck him, but he gritted his teeth and maintained his protective stance. Moments later, Malon's security forces burst into the room, subduing the remaining attackers. As the dust settled, Randy slowly stood, wincing at the pain in his side. "Are you all right?" he asked Karos, his voice tight with concern. Karos's bioluminescence pulsed with gratitude and worry. "I'm unharmed thanks to you, but you're injured." As medical staff rushed to treat Randy's wounds, news of his actions spread quickly across Malona. The live broadcast, which had captured every moment of the attack and Randy's heroic response, became the most watched event in Malon history. In the following days, as Randy recovered in a Milan medical facility, public opinion began to shift dramatically. Milan's citizens, moved by his bravery and selflessness, started to view humans in a new light. Protests gave way to rallies calling for increased cooperation between the two species. Seizing the moment, Councillor Nira called for an immediate vote on the future of human-Malon relations. As the High Council convened once again, Randy watched the proceedings from his hospital bed, Karos by his side. Their hands were intertwined, a simple gesture that spoke volumes about the potential for unity between their species. As the councillors began to cast their votes, Randy held his breath. The future of human-Malon relations hung in the balance, and he knew that whatever the outcome, Nothing would ever be the same. Same. As the final votes were tallied, Randy squeezed Karos's hand, their intertwined appendages a symbol of hope for both their species. The results are in, Counselor Nira announced, her bioluminescence pulsing with nearly unleashed excitement. By a narrow margin, the High Council has voted in favor of continued cooperation and cultural exchange between humans and Malone. A collective sigh of relief filled the chamber, followed by a burst of chatter. Randy felt a weight lift from his shoulders, and he turned to Karos, their eyes meeting in a moment of shared joy. "This is just the beginning," Karos said, their bioluminescence flickering with a mix of relief and anticipation. In the days that followed, the Malin government moved quickly to capitalize on the newfound goodwill. Randy found himself in a whirlwind of meetings and negotiations, often acting as a bridge between human and Malin officials. During one such meeting, Counselor Nira unveiled a bold proposal. "We believe the time has come for a more permanent collaboration," she said, her appendages moving in sweeping gestures as she spoke. "We propose the establishment of a joint human-Malin research institute, dedicated to studying the artifacts from the polar expedition and exploring our shared history." The room erupted in a mix of excited chatter and concerned murmurs. Randy leaned forward, his mind racing with the possibilities. "Furthermore," Nira continued, "we would like to offer you, Randy, the position of human liaison and lead researcher at this institute." Randy's breath caught in his throat. He glanced at Karos, who nodded encouragingly. I'd be honored," Randy managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "Excellent," Nira replied, her bioluminescence pulsing with satisfaction. "Karos, we'd like you to serve as the Malon counterpart." As preparations for the institute began, Randy and Karos threw themselves into their work, spending long hours poring over the artifacts and data crystals they had recovered. However, their research took an unexpected turn when they received an urgent message from the medical facility where the ancient Malon specimens were being stored. "The specimens are showing signs of cellular regeneration," Dr. Ilara, a prominent Malon geneticist, explained as they rushed to the facility. "The stasis pods we disturbed during the expedition have initiated a revival process." Randy and Karos exchanged worried glances as they entered the lab. The sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The ancient Malon specimens, once perfectly preserved, were now twitching and pulsing with faint bioluminescence. "This is unprecedented," Karos breathed, their appendages moving in agitated patterns. Over the next few weeks, Randy and Karos worked closely with Dr. Ilara, combining human and Malon medical knowledge to ensure the safety of the reviving specimens. The news of the revival spread quickly, sparking intense debates across Malona about the ethical, scientific, and cultural implications. As they worked, Randy couldn't help but notice the differences between these ancient Malons and their modern counterparts. The sexual dimorphism was striking, with clear distinctions between male and female specimens. Their efforts paid off when the first of the ancient Malons fully awakened. Thoran, as they named him, emerged from his stasis pod, his multifaceted eyes blinking in confusion at the strange world around him. Where am I?" Thoran asked, his voice raspy from millennia of disuse. Randy stepped forward, feeling a strange kinship with this being from the distant past. "You're safe," he said softly. "We're here to help you." As the only male in the room, Randy found himself taking on the role of guide for Thoran. He helped the ancient Malon navigate the complexities of modern Malon society, drawing on his own experiences as a male in a sexually dimorphic species. "It's all so different," Thoran said one day, as they walked through the Institute's gardens. "Our cities, our technology, even our bodies have changed so much." Randy nodded, understanding the feeling of being out of place all too well. "Change is inevitable," he said. "But some things remain constant. The desire to learn, to grow, to connect with others, those are universal." As more ancient Malons awoke, the situation on Malona grew tense. Conservative factions began to protest, arguing that the revival of these ancient beings threatened to destabilize their civilization. "We cannot allow these relics of the past to undo millennia of progress," One politician shouted at a rally, his bioluminescence flashing angrily. In response to the growing crisis, the Malon High Council convened an emergency session. Randy and Karos found themselves once again standing before the council, this time to testify about the importance of integrating the ancient Malons into modern society. These beings are not just relics, Karos argued passionately. They are living links to our past, carriers of knowledge we thought lost forever. By embracing them, we embrace a fuller understanding of ourselves. Randy stepped forward, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. The existence of these ancient Malons doesn't just shed light on your past, he said. It also provides invaluable insights into the shared history of our species. The potential for scientific and cultural advancement is immeasurable. As Randy spoke, he noticed movement in the back of the chamber. A group of Malons, their bioluminescence pulsing in aggressive patterns, began to push their way towards the front. "Watch out!" Randy shouted, recognizing the signs of an impending attack. Chaos erupted as the extremist group surged forward, targeting both the council members and the ancient Malons present. Randy found himself back-to-back with Karos and Thoran, fending off attackers with improvised weapons. "We need to get the council members to safety," Karos yelled over the din. Randy nodded, his military training kicking in. He quickly formulated a plan, using his knowledge of both human and Malon physiology to outmaneuver the attackers. As security forces finally managed to subdue the extremists, Randy, Karos, and Thoran stood amid the aftermath, battered but unbroken. The attack, meant to disrupt the proceedings, had instead served as a powerful demonstration of the strength that could come from human-Malon cooperation. In the days that followed, public opinion shifted dramatically. The image of Randy, Karos, and Thoran working together to protect the council became a symbol of unity and progress. Seizing the moment, the Malon government fast-tracked the establishment of the Human Malon Research Institute. As construction began, Randy and Karos found themselves at the center of a new initiative to develop an integration program for the ancient Malons. "It's not going to be easy," Randy said one evening, as he and Karos watched the first foundations of the institute being laid. "We're not just bridging a gap between two species, but between two eras." Karos's bioluminescence pulsed in a pattern Randy had come to recognize as affection. "True," they said, "but if anyone can do it, it's us." As the sun set over the construction site, Randy felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The challenges ahead were immense, but so were the possibilities. He glanced at Karos, their appendages intertwined, and knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Together. As they turned their attention back to the construction site, the first signs of a new era were taking shape before their eyes. In the months that followed, the Human Malon Research Institute grew from a concept into a sprawling complex of laboratories, lecture halls, and living quarters. Randy and Karos found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity, overseeing research projects, mediating cultural exchanges, and guiding the integration of the revived ancient Malons. Thoran, the first of the ancient Malons to awaken, had become an invaluable member of their team. His unique perspective bridged the gap between the past and present, offering insights that neither humans nor modern Malons could have conceived. One evening, as Randy was reviewing data in his office, Karos burst in, their bioluminescence pulsing with urgency. "Randy, you need to see this," they said, their appendages moving in agitated patterns. Randy followed Karos to one of the genetics labs, where Dr. Alara was hunched over a microscope. The Malon geneticist looked up as they entered, her multifaceted eyes reflecting a mix of excitement and concern. "We've detected something unexpected," Dr. Alara said, gesturing for Randy to look through the microscope. As Randy peered into the eyepiece, Dr. Alara explained, "A group of young Malons has been experimenting with genetic modification, attempting to reintroduce sexual dimorphism into our population. But the modifications are spreading faster than we anticipated." Randy looked up, his brow furrowed. "How is that possible?" "It appears to be interacting with modern Malon biology in ways we didn't foresee," Karos interjected. "We're seeing spontaneous development of opposite-sex characteristics in a portion of the population." The implications hit Randy like a shockwave. This could cause widespread panic, he said, running a hand through his hair. Over the next few weeks, reports began flooding in from across Malona. Malons were waking up to find their bodies changing, developing characteristics of the opposite sex. The panic that Randy had predicted quickly became a reality. The Malone High Council called an emergency session, summoning Randy and Karos to provide insight and recommend a course of action. As they stood before the council, Randy felt the weight of two worlds on his shoulders. "Counselors," he began, "we're facing an unprecedented crisis. The genetic changes are spreading rapidly, and we need to act quickly to manage the situation and maintain social order." Karos stepped forward, their bioluminescence pulsing steadily. "We propose a two-pronged approach. First, we need to intensify our research to understand and potentially control these genetic shifts. Second, we must launch a comprehensive public information campaign to address the fears and concerns of the population." The council chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices and flashing bioluminescence. Some councilors supported the proposal, while others argued for more drastic measures. As the debate raged on, a commotion outside the chamber caught everyone's attention. The doors burst open, revealing a group of Malons with mismatched sexual characteristics, their bioluminescence flashing in angry patterns. "We demand answers," one of them shouted. "What have you done to us?" Security forces moved to intercept the protesters, but Randy held up a hand, stepping forward to address them directly. "We understand your fear and confusion," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We're working tirelessly to understand what's happening and how to help. Please, give us a chance to explain." For a tense moment, it seemed the situation might escalate. Then slowly the protesters' bioluminescence began to calm. They allowed themselves to be escorted to a separate room where Randy and Karos could address their concerns more privately. As they worked to calm the immediate crisis, a new challenge emerged. A group calling themselves the Purists began staging protests across major Malone cities. They viewed the genetic changes as a threat to Malone identity and demanded immediate action to reverse the process. Some of these protests turned violent, with purists clashing with those experiencing genetic changes and their supporters. The Malone security forces struggled to maintain order. In the midst of this chaos, Thoran approached Randy and Karos with an offer. "Let me act as a mediator," he said, his multifaceted eyes reflecting dedication. "As an ancient Malon with natural sexual dimorphism, I can bridge the gap between the different factions." Randy and Karos exchanged glances, then nodded in agreement. Thoran's unique perspective could be invaluable in addressing the concerns of both traditional Malons and those experiencing genetic changes. As Thoran began his work as a mediator, Randy and Karos threw themselves into their research with renewed vigor. They knew that understanding the root cause of the genetic shifts was crucial to finding a solution. Late one night, as they pored over data in the lab, Karos made a startling discovery. "Randy, look at this," they said, their appendages moving excitedly over a holographic display. Randy leaned in, his eyes widening as he processed the information. "Is this evidence of a shared ancestry between humans and Malones?" Karos nodded, their bioluminescence pulsing with excitement. "It appears so. These genetic markers suggest both our species may have been seeded by an ancient spacefaring civilization." The implications of this discovery were staggering. It not only provided a potential key to understanding the current genetic crisis, but also challenged fundamental beliefs about the origin of both species. As they prepared to present their findings to the Malone High Council and human diplomatic representatives, alarms blared throughout the research institute. Security feeds showed a coordinated attack by the Purists, who were attempting to destroy the ancient Malone specimens and research data. Randy, Karos, and Thoran sprang into action, coordinating the defense of the facility. They utilized a combination of human and Malone technologies, working seamlessly together to repel the attackers. In the chaos of the battle, Randy found himself cornered in one of the genetics labs. As he fought off a group of purists, a containment unit was breached, exposing him to a concentrated dose of the genetic modification agent. As the security forces finally managed to subdue the attackers, Randy collapsed, his body racked with pain. Karos rushed to his side, their bioluminescence pulsing with fear and concern. "Randy, can you hear me?" Karos called, cradling Randy's head. Randy's eyes fluttered open, but something was different. His irises seemed to shimmer with an internal light, and his skin had taken on a faint, pulsating glow. "Karos," he whispered, his voice strained, "something's happening to me." As medical staff rushed to Randy's aid, Karos realized that their partner's exposure to the genetic agent had triggered unexpected physiological changes. The line between human and Malin biology was blurring within Randy's very cells. The Malin High Council, recognizing the gravity of the situation, declared a state of emergency. They established a joint human-Malin task force to address the crisis, appointing Randy and Karos as co-leaders, despite Randy's condition. As Randy's transformation progressed, Karos worked tirelessly to find a solution, pushing the boundaries of both human and Malin medical knowledge. Their personal relationship was tested as they navigated the challenges of Randy's changing physiology while trying to save Malin society from fracturing. Days turned into weeks as Randy, Karos, and their team raced against time to develop a comprehensive plan to address the genetic crisis. They knew that the future of both species and their interstellar relations hung in the balance. Finally, after countless sleepless nights and breakthrough moments, they were ready to present their findings and recommendations to a joint assembly of the Malin High Council and human diplomatic representatives. As they stood outside the council chambers, Randy and Karos exchanged a look of willpower. Randy's skin now pulsed with a soft bioluminescence, a visible reminder of the changes he'd undergone and the stakes of their mission. "Whatever happens in there," Randy said, his voice carrying a new resonant quality, "we're in this together." Karos's appendages intertwined with Randy's fingers, their bioluminescence synchronizing for a moment. "Together," they agreed. The doors to the council chamber swung open, and they stepped forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead and shape the future of human-Malin relations. The doors swung open, revealing a sea of faces, both human and Malin, all watching with intense anticipation. Randy and Karos stepped forward, their synchronization evident in their movements. The council chamber fell silent as they took their positions at the center of the room. Randy's skin pulsed with a soft, ethereal glow, drawing curious glances from the assembled dignitaries. Karos began, their voice clear and steady. "Esteemed members of the Malin High Council and human diplomatic representatives, we stand before you today to address the genetic crisis that threatens our societies." As Karos outlined the situation, Randy observed the room. He noted the tense postures of the Malin counselors, their bioluminescence flickering with anxiety. The human diplomats leaned forward, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. When it was his turn to speak, Randy stepped forward. His voice carried a new resonance, a blend of human timbre and Malin harmonics. "Our proposed solution is twofold," he explained. "First, a controlled introduction of the genetic modifications, allowing us to manage the process rather than be overwhelmed by it. Second, a comprehensive education and support program to help Malins adapt to their changing biology." As Randy delved into the details of their plan, murmurs of discussion rippled through the assembly. Some nodded in agreement, while others frowned, clearly skeptical. Suddenly, the chamber doors burst open. Thuran rushed in, his multifaceted eyes wide with alarm. "Counselors, ambassadors, we have an emergency," he exclaimed. "The Purists have launched coordinated attacks on major Malin cities. They're attempting to release a weaponized version of the original Malin genome." The chamber erupted into chaos. Counselors leaped to their feet, their bioluminescence flashing in patterns of distress. Human diplomats shouted questions, demanding more information. Randy and Karos exchanged a quick glance, years of partnership allowing them to communicate without words. They sprang into action, adapting their presentation on the fly. "Counselors, ambassadors, please," Randy's enhanced voice cut through the din. "We need to act now. We propose deploying joint human Malin security forces to protect key infrastructure and research facilities." Karos stepped forward, their appendages moving in urgent patterns. "The Human Malin Research Institute must be our top priority. It contains vital data and specimens crucial to solving this crisis." As the council debated their proposal, the doors swung open once more. Dr. Alara rushed in, her multifaceted eyes fixed on Randy. "We've made a breakthrough," she announced. "Randy's hybrid physiology has stabilized. He's developed an immunity to further genetic modifications." The implications of this news silenced the room. Randy felt all eyes turn to him, his bioluminescent skin pulsing with increased intensity under their scrutiny. "This could be the key to creating a vaccine," Karos said, their voice filled with hope. "A way to protect against both the ongoing crisis and the purest threat." The Milan High Council conferred briefly, their appendages moving in rapid, complex patterns. The lead counselor turned to Randy and Karos. "We grant your task force emergency powers. Implement your plan and counter these attacks." Randy stepped forward. "I'll lead a team to secure the research institute." Karos moved to his side. "I'm going with you. My knowledge of Malan biology is essential for protecting our research." As they prepared to leave, Randy caught Karos's gaze. In that moment, he saw a reflection of his own grit, along with something deeper, unspoken but understood. They raced to the research institute, arriving to find purist extremists already beginning their assault. The air crackled with energy, weapons fire, and the acrid smell of burning equipment filled their nostrils. Randy's enhanced physiology allowed him to move with incredible speed and precision. He darted between cover, disarming purists with efficient, calculated movements. Beside him, Karos coordinated their defense team, their intimate knowledge of the Institute's layout proving invaluable. Suddenly, a purist agent slipped past their defenses, making a beeline for the secure storage area. Randy and Karos gave chase, their footsteps echoing through the winding corridors. They cornered the agent in a lab filled with delicate equipment. The purist brandished a vial of glowing liquid, the weaponized genome. Randy's hybrid senses kicked into overdrive. He could perceive the agent's subtle muscle movements, anticipating each action before it happened. As the purist lunged, Randy ducked and weaved, avoiding the agent's desperate attacks. Karos circled around, their appendages manipulating nearby equipment. With a burst of quick movements, they created a containment field, trapping the weaponized genome as the vial shattered. With the immediate threat neutralized, Randy and Karos established a command center within the facility. Reports flooded in from across Malona, successful defenses in some cities, but confirmed releases of the weaponized genome in others. Dr. Alara and her team worked feverishly, using Randy's unique physiology as a template for a potential vaccine. The air in the lab was thick with tension as they raced against time. In a rare moment of quiet, Randy and Karos found themselves alone in an observation room overlooking the city. The skyline was dotted with plumes of smoke, evidence of the ongoing conflict. Randy's hand found Karos's appendage, their bioluminescence synchronizing. "I never imagined we'd end up here when we first met," Randy said softly. Karos's multifaceted eyes met Randy's gaze. "Neither did I, but there's no one I'd rather face this with." Their moment was interrupted by an urgent message. The vaccine development had reached a critical stage. As they hurried to oversee the final testing, Randy and Karos knew that the next few hours would determine the fate of Milan society and the future of human-Milan relations. The weight of two worlds rested on their shoulders as they entered the lab, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together. The lab doors hissed open as Randy and Karos rushed in, their eyes immediately drawn to the glowing vials of vaccine arranged in neat rows on the central workstation. Dr. Alara looked up from her microscope, her multifaceted eyes glinting with a mix of exhaustion and hope. "We're ready," she announced, her voice tight with anticipation. "The vaccine has passed all our tests. It's time to begin distribution." Randy nodded, his skin pulsing with a soft bioluminescence that matched the rhythm of Karos's own light patterns. "Let's get to work," he said, his hybrid voice carrying a newfound authority. Within minutes, the lab transformed into a command center. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing real-time maps of Malona's major cities. Red dots indicated areas where the purists had released their weaponized genome, while blue markers represented vaccine distribution points. Karos coordinated with Malan health officials, their appendages moving in rapid, complex patterns as they relayed instructions. Randy liaised with human diplomatic channels, ensuring a steady supply of resources and support from Earth. As the first reports of successful vaccine deployments trickled in, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Security feeds showed a wave of purist forces converging on the research institute. "They're making their final push," Thuran's voice crackled over the comms. "We need to hold them off while the vaccine distribution continues." Randy's enhanced senses kicked into overdrive as he sprinted toward the main entrance. He could hear the rapid footsteps of purist attackers, smell the acrid scent of their energy weapons charging. With lightning-fast reflexes, he ducked behind a pillar just as a barrage of energy bolts scorched the air where he'd been standing. "Karos, status on the vaccine?" Randy called into his comm unit as he returned fire, his movements fluid and precise. "We're at 30% distribution," Karos replied, their voice steady despite the chaos. "Dr. Alara and I are working on increasing the vaccine's efficacy against the weaponized genome. We need more time." Randy gritted his teeth, his hybrid physiology allowing him to process the battlefield with unprecedented clarity. He coordinated the defense teams, anticipating the purist moves and countering them with tactical precision. Despite their efforts, a group of purists managed to breach the outer defenses. Randy found himself sprinting back to the main laboratory, his heart pounding as he realized the vaccine samples were now at risk. He burst through the lab doors to find Karos and Dr. Alara cornered by a group of purists, the precious vaccine vials glowing ominously between them. Without hesitation, Randy positioned himself between the attackers and his partners. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice carrying a harmonious blend of human and Malin tones. "Look at me. I'm living proof that our species can coexist, can even merge in ways we never imagined." The purists hesitated, their weapons wavering as they took in Randy's unique appearance. He pressed on, his words flowing with a passionate intensity. "I understand your fear. Change is terrifying, especially when it comes to the very essence of who we are. But I've experienced it firsthand. This isn't about erasing who you are. It's about growth, about discovering new potentials we never knew existed." As Randy spoke, he noticed a flicker of uncertainty in the eyes of some purists. He could sense their internal struggle, their deeply held beliefs clashing with the reality standing before them. Suddenly, the lab doors burst open once more. Thuran rushed in, followed by a diverse group of Malones, some with the sleek appearance of modern society, others bearing the distinctive features of their ancient ancestors. "The people have spoken," Thuran announced, his multifaceted eyes gleaming. "We choose unity over division, progress over fear." The unexpected reinforcement broke the standoff. As the purists lowered their weapons, Randy and Karos sprang into action, securing the vaccine samples and resuming the distribution efforts. Over the following weeks, the effects of the vaccine became evident across Malona. The uncontrolled genetic changes stabilized, resulting in a Malin population more diverse than ever before. Randy and Karos found themselves at the forefront of education and integration efforts, helping society adapt to its new reality. Their days were filled with challenges, from developing new medical protocols to mediating conflicts between different Malon factions. Yet they faced each obstacle together, their unique partnership a living symbol of what could be achieved through cooperation. As the immediate crisis subsided, the Malin High Council convened to address the future of their species and their relationship with humanity. Randy and Karos stood side by side before the assembled dignitaries, their bioluminescence pulsing in perfect synchronization as they presented their report. "The events of the past months have shown us the strength that lies in diversity," Karos began, their appendages moving in graceful patterns. Randy continued, his hybrid voice resonating through the chamber. "Through collaboration between our species, we've not only overcome a grave threat, but discovered new possibilities for growth and understanding." Their words, backed by irrefutable data and first-hand experience, struck a chord with the council. After hours of deliberation, a historic decision was reached: the establishment of a permanent interspecies exchange program with the expanded Human Malin Research Institute at its heart. As the council session adjourned, Randy and Karos found a quiet moment alone in one of the Institute's observation decks. The Malonan sky stretched out before them, its alien beauty a reminder of how far they'd come. Karos's appendage intertwined with Randy's fingers, their bioluminescence creating intricate patterns where their skin met. "I never imagined this outcome when we first met," Karos said softly. Randy smiled, feeling the warmth of their connection. "Neither did I, but I wouldn't change a thing." Their moment of reflection was interrupted by a chime from their comm units. The final preparations for the Alliance celebration were underway, and their presence was requested. As they made their way to the Grand Hall, Randy and Karos exchanged a look of shared purpose. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, a bridge between two species, forging a new path among the stars.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.